Three, two, one, go.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Fours podcast, a podcast from Puerto Rican friends coming together to do deep dives into Star Wars and other nerd-related media. This is season 4, and today we are dedicating the episode to one of our favorite characters in Star Wars, the infamous Anakin Skywalker. Now, we kind of thought this was the best time for it because we're in, the Hayden Christensen Renaissance, and we were feeling a little inspired when we were talking about that last episode of Ahsoka and how kind of Anakin's story came full circle within that show. So we kind of wanted just to deep dive into this character that we haven't, dedicated an entire episode to yet. So here we are, Anakin Skywalker.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting because it's been a roller coaster of sorts, right? With Anakin Skywalker and Hayden Christensen's portrayal of Anakin Skywalker since the prequels to now. It's been very, it started very negatively, right? But it's so nice to have it be very positive. It's been a roller coaster, and we're in a crescendo, and it's all of a sudden in this really great moment. But before we get too deep into things, we have to keep reminding everybody that by the time we're recording this, the SAG-AFTRA 2023 strike is still ongoing. Without the labor of the actors currently on strike, the movies and shows we're going to be discussing here would not be possible. So let's be cognizant of that. It's been a long time, but just because it's been a long time doesn't mean that we get to ignore it. Hopefully that there's a deal soon with the AMPTP, according to everything we've seen from the SAG-AFTRA official channels. It seems like things might be going in the right direction. So hopefully a deal is struck soon, and a deal that's fair to all the actors on strike. If you're willing and able, please contribute to the Community Actors Fund, which is in the description below. And if you're not able, please raise awareness through any means that you can by sharing any posts from SAG-AFTRA on social media, or just not forgetting about it and to support the actors. Because, without the actors, we couldn't have gotten Hayden to act in this role, so it's very important. And Jake Lloyd, we can't forget Jake Lloyd, the original Anakin Skywalker. But Anakin Skywalker's been it's a fascinating character just because there's been so much mythos around him, especially with the original trilogy. The first time we hear his character's name is in episode 4 when Obi-Wan Kenobi mentions Anakin Skywalker's name as a good friend and a great pilot, and how he was murdered by Darth Vader. I guess that's the best place to start. It's just the moment that we first hear that name as Luke Skywalker's father. Nani, do you remember how you felt at that moment? Because at least for me personally, I remember the original trilogy as a group. So I don't remember how I felt in episode 4 when I heard the name. But do you remember that moment, having to?
I don't actually. I mean, we're always, to clarify to our audience that we grew up with all 3 of the originals already out, but before the prequel trilogies came out, so we thought, those 3 movies were the only thing we really knew of Star Wars while we were growing up. And I don't even remember if I watched them in order originally. I kind of just remember them being a part of my life since I was little, and always knowing that Darth Vader was Anakin, but I don't remember that shock moment in Empire, finding out that it's that he's the father, but because I kind of grew up always knowing it was a constant. So I wish I could remember the exact moment when I found out and what I felt, because it's always shocking to me when people who don't know do find out. But now that's really hard to find, because even people that don't know anything about Star Wars know that Anakin is Darth Vader. So
it's a ubiquitous part of this cultural zeitgeist. But it's wild. It's wild to think about, especially now, because I'm in a nostalgic mood lately. I will admit, especially we were talking before starting to record, especially now that the Beatles released their final song, and it's so wild to think about a new Beatles song in 2023 and listening to
Yeah.
uh, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr doing things in 2023 with audio recordings from John Lennon from the 70s and George Harrison from the 90s, and it's like, it's like it's necromancy, right? We're listening to the it's to quote Star
Yeah.
Wars, the dead speak, right? It's weird to think
Yeah.
about like how the past is haunting us still, and in a way, that's how it kind of feels to think about the original trilogy in that way. It's like this era that we didn't know, right? That we were going to
Mhm.
get anything else from it, and
Yeah.
that we would be at this day and age, right? Talking about Anakin Skywalker in 2023 as a Force
Yeah.
Ghost, but
Mhm.
not Sebastian Stan Force Ghost. It's Hayden Christensen, and not replaced in Return of the Jedi for continuity with the prequels. Like no, brand spanking new Force Ghost Hayden
Yeah.
Christensen as Anakin Skywalker
With
in
the Jedi robes
with the
and
Jedi robes
mhm.
in a new Star Wars show. So
It's crazy.
it's
Mhm.
crazy to think of that journey, and it all started in Return of the Jedi to an extent when we finally got to see Shaw. Oh my god, I stumbled on my words there. As the Force Ghost of Anakin Skywalker and the man behind Darth Vader's
Right.
mask. How did that scene make you feel when you were like seeing for the first time when they take off the mask of this,
Yeah.
horror fiction, horror
Yeah.
villain, and
I
all of a
mean,
sudden it's just like this crusty white guy with
I know that's so crazy to think about it now because now we have so much more meat to the story of Anakin Skywalker. But when we were growing up, all we really knew was Darth Vader.
Mhm,
All we know of Anakin Skywalker is the name and, that he is Darth Vader. But all we know is Vader, like this villain of one of our favorite movies that, even people, again, that don't know anything about it know this is a person to fear.
mhm,
And that scene at the end, I mean, I still sometimes I like rewatching them every so often, and that scene still kind of makes me tear up, like the whole like reconciliation with Luke, and seeing this like you were saying, it's this armor. You're afraid of this person. He is a terror, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But in Obi-Wan, we got to really see a terror, Darth Vader, which was fantastic. Aside from obviously the hallway scene in Rogue One,
mhm,
but to see this fearful, like always, sitting up straight, just like imposing man, just be this old dude who
mhm,
who is
mhm,
trying to save his son from torture, and he's just all he wanted to do before he died was to see him with his own eyes and not through the mask, which is to me it's so incredibly depressing. But it's a really compelling story. But we know that he redeems himself then. But that's all we get from the original trilogy. We still, to us, he's still like the bad guy. You do have that image of him, finally making it in becoming one with the Force when you see all three Force ghosts at the end, and it's
mhm,
like, oh, he finally made it back to Yoda and Obi-Wan and everything. But since we don't know all the background and how the character necessarily got there, it's a beautiful scene, but we don't necessarily understand everything that was implicated there. And as
mhm.
we get to know this character, it's more and more impactful. And I don't necessarily agree that it should have been changed to Christian Haydenson in the cuts when they
Christian Haydenson, who's that?
Hayden Christensen. Estoy como tú cambiando las palabras. Um, Dios. I didn't like it when they switched him.
Mhm.
I
Well,
kind
but
of
when that happened and you didn't like it, you were in a different point. You
yeah,
were in a different
yeah.
point in your life. Let's put it that way.
True, true. Um, and I don't necessarily think it's the way to go. I mean, I know that that's what Anakin, when he was a Jedi, that's what Anakin looked like. But to me, like, because he became redeemed at the end, that is the way that he should enter, into the Force. After
Mhm,
everything, it's like you're erasing everything that happened when he was Darth Vader, which it was also a part of him, which is great. Obviously we get the Force Ghost in Ahsoka, but at the end of the original trilogy, I think it should have been like the original actor. But that's my opinion.
it's interesting because uh, in hindsight, I mean, let's talk about that now, right? Since you brought it up,
Mhm.
uh, it's always funny to go back and think about the original trilogy and all the different changes that George Lucas was
That
doing
have
to
been
it.
made.
Doing
Yeah,
he was like every time there was a re-release of the movies, like there
yeah.
was a little
Something
change,
changed.
It was a
Yep.
little change, and all the fans were up in arms about it and being like, why would you touch it and change it and make it something different? Just leave it alone. Let it be the thing that we fell in love with originally." Which is a valid point in terms of like
Yeah.
the preservation of cinema. It's just like this
Yeah.
like have the thing be the thing it was. But at the end of
Right.
the day, also I do accept the argument that like a creator never ends, like
Right.
the process, and like if he feels that there were things that he couldn't do that he needed to like improve, especially the
Yeah.
after the prequels came out to like help tie everything together so that it's one
Yeah.
cohesive package, then sure. I just don't think that it should be at the expense of destroying the original vision. I think that
Yeah.
yeah, make changes, but make sure to preserve the original as well, so that like we
Mhm.
have that record. So I think it's not either or, it's both and
Yeah.
I know I say that all the time, but nuance is important in all these conversations. And to that extent, to remove ourselves from the in-world reasoning of who should be there, like old Anakin or young Anakin,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think narratively, in terms of like how we as an audience see the films,
Yeah.
not the film, the films, right?
Yeah.
I think it's 100% justified to change Sebastian Shaw to Hayden
Yeah.
Christensen, because we as an audience, right?
Yeah.
We let's assume we're watching them chronologically. Then
Right.
all of a sudden we get to six, and it's like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah.
That's not the guy I've
That's
been
not
seeing.
Anakin. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where like I think there's a visual consistency that needs to occur so that the story is read in a cohesive way, which I think is one of the issues that we're having now in this cinematic universe conversation with the MCU, and should we recast Kang because of all the issues that
Yeah.
are happening with the actor, or should we recast the original trilogy actors in any new stories that are happening, or should we keep
Mhm.
doing the deep fake thing? Uh, I think that both conversations are valid. I think they're very different to that extent,
Yeah.
because one is about continuing stories with like new actors, which I think is completely valid. I think it's arguably the right thing to do. And another one's just like, okay, making sure that the old story has like a cohesive visual
Yeah.
structure to it. So that's why I am totally on board with Hayden Christensen at the end of Return of the Jedi. Because think about it, because then all of a sudden, like you see Hayden Christensen, some guy, and then
Yeah.
you see like Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, and it's just like Hayden Christensen, Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
it's cognitive dissonance all of a sudden. It's like whoa, it's like
Yeah.
who's that guy?
You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but it was interesting watching Return of the Jedi growing up, and yeah, and then seeing some fragile old man inside that suit, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's so visually impactful, and rightly so,
Mhm.
because you see like this unstoppable force of terror, and then
Yeah.
at the what's behind it is like this vulnerable, scared, fragile person,
Broken man. Yeah. Mhm.
which is kind of a mirror to Palpatine to an extent, because Palpatine is also like a old man,
Yeah.
but opposite of Vader, he's exposing his frailty, but
Right.
actually, but it's
Hiding
actually
the power. Yeah.
but like
Mhm.
using that the mask is
Mhm.
the old frailty, when inside
Right.
it's just like this evil darkness, right? That's unstoppable. And Vader's the opposite. Like he has the mask
Yeah.
that portrays the unstoppable
Strength.
evil, but on
Mhm.
the inside he's like this uh frail, old man. So it's visually jarring, right, to see that for the
Yeah.
first time, be like, "Oh, what's going on?" Especially if you saw Star Wars, how we did, which is like without the prequels, so we don't
Yeah.
know
We don't
anything
know.
about the
Mhm.
Anakin character. All of a sudden, that's the first time we see him,
Glimpse. Yep.
and it's like, oh man, like
Oh wow, that was
that's
Darth Vader the whole time. Wow. Yeah.
which was wild,
Yeah. It was.
and
Yeah.
and poetic, and I think it is definitely like the right thing. George Lucas, you know what you're doing, man.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Other times, not so much, and we'll get to those. But yeah, Empire, Return of the Jedi came out in 1983,
Yeah.
so
The
that
year I
means
was
that
born.
that means that there
Yep.
were a couple of years
Mhm.
without any more
Mhm.
stories, and Episode One only came out in 1999. So in all that time, we kind of, at least I personally, didn't really know too much about the Anakin character besides everything we learned in
Yeah.
the original trilogy up until Phantom Menace. Natalie, did you ever think about Anakin Skywalker before Episode 1 was announced?
Not really. I gotta be honest. Not really. I mean, there's always that question in how he ended up maimed and in that suit. That's
Mhm.
always something that stays in the back of your mind. But I wasn't really into, reading the comics or any of the books or anything. I was just like a fan of the movies and that was it. I didn't really look into it too much. So when episode one was first announced, I remember, first feeling shock because I never thought we were going to get any more Star Wars. It was the three films and that was it. So when they first announced the originals, and then I remember that first like teaser or something. That's when Anakin is meeting Obi-Wan for the first time, and when you first see it, you think it's Luke somehow, and you're like, "But that's weird because you know why did they go back to like a young Luke, whatever?" And then when you find out that they went all the way back to Anakin, I thought one, it was a super bold move,
Mhm.
and I was just super excited. Those posters of what's his name, Frank Lloyd, like the the kid who played him.
Jake Lloyd.
Jake Lloyd, and that awesome poster of him just standing next to the building in Tatooine, and the shadow of Darth Vader is the shadow he casts. And
Mhm.
I remember thinking, I can't believe they're going all the way back to a little Anakin. So we're gonna get the whole story now, and I remember feeling really, really excited about
It's interesting because I keep saying it's interesting every time.
it. Yeah.
You finish the thought, but it is. I don't remember, and this is the point where I'm not sure if I'm making up a memory or not. Uh,
Okay.
and in, now I don't know when I started reading Star Wars books. I don't know if it was
Okay.
like pre Episode 1 or post Episode 1.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with post Episode 1 because I was probably like too young. I was what I was I think 11. Yeah, like when Episode 1 came out, 1999. I was born in '88. So yeah, uh, so probably afterwards, I started reading Star Wars books. So probably I didn't have a much of a consciousness of Anakin's
Yeah.
character, of like what that history might have been
Yeah.
between before Episode 4. So I do remember, and I was looking it up while you were talking. I do remember there was like a painting that was done in the '90s that showed like a dark Anakin with, and it showed like his wife that was unnamed at the time with a baby.
Hmm.
And but I think that's one of those things that discovered like after like I started getting to lore and starting to read the
Right.
books and
Hmm.
all those things, and that's when the mythology as well started to be kind of sprinkled in. I remember knowing about the Obi-Wan and Anakin fight over lava. I know that was
Yeah.
like, or a
Yeah.
volcano. People that was
Hmm.
kind of like a thing that people knew about
That people knew.
that
Yeah.
that happened, and I don't remember. And that I probably should have researched that for this episode for sure. Uh, Hindsight's 2020. But I don't remember what story that came off from, or if that was from a reference book or something. But I distinctly recall, like at least going into episode 2, and definitely going to episode 3, that was what
That was
happened.
a thing that was gonna happen.
That
Yeah.
was
Hmm.
like the thing of
Hmm.
how the final confrontation was. That there was either a volcano or there was
Hmm.
some lava or fire, and between like Obi-Wan and Anakin, and that's how that was gonna occur. But yeah, I think for episode 1 though, it was very virgin in that sense because there was like
Yeah. No
preconceived
idea what was
notions
gonna happen.
no
Yeah. Hmm.
preconceived notions into that, and I was the perfect age for that movie too, because I was at an age where I'm just like I had no expectations and didn't have, like, I mean, obviously I had an emotional attachment to Star Wars, but it
Hmm.
wasn't in a way that I felt entitled to it, so that I could project my expectations to it in a selfish way. I was just like a clean slate. So it's like, oh, new Star Wars, this is great. Let's go, let's
Yeah.
do it. And episode 1, I loved it. I loved episode 1. It was
I
great.
loved episode one too. Yeah.
And I watched it very uncritically at the time. So like I
Hmm.
didn't particularly care about Jake Lloyd's portrayal of
Yeah.
Anakin. I didn't care that like Anakin was a baby. He's not a baby. He's what, like 9 or
But
something.
but he
Uh,
was, yeah, he was really young.
he was a very young child
Yeah.
instead of like a teenager, like we were hoping or expecting. Well, hope. Well, me hope, expecting
Right.
after I
Mhm.
got older. But yeah, I was able to enjoy the ride like non-critically and be like, oh, there he is. There's Anakin Skywalker,
Yeah.
and it's great. And honestly, I wish I could kind of go back a little bit and capture that naivete
Childhood wonder.
and that yeah, and that wonder of being able to just enjoy the thing for what it
Yeah.
is instead of like coming in with this cynicism that
Super judgmental.
sometimes we
Yeah.
have now. I feel
Yeah.
like we have done
Yeah.
strides. I think we've come away from the people we were
Yeah.
back
We
in the
were
early aughts, and I think
we were
there's
especially about episode 2, we were kind of hateful. We were on the bandwagon of the hate. Yeah.
we were not the kindest people to
Yeah.
episode 2,
Mhm.
and we'll get there. But I feel, and I think the podcast has definitely been like a great vehicle for that, to be able to be like, hey,
To soothe those emotions.
let's be a little,
Yeah.
let's stop being jerks and just
Yeah.
take things for what they are and
Yep.
appreciate them for what they were, and move past it and be able
Mhm.
to watch things without the expectations that we unfairly project
Yeah.
on things. But yeah, Attack of the Clones is when we actually, because despite seeing the Anakin in
Yeah.
episode 1, like, that's it's too early, I think, in his development as a character to be
Yeah.
able to start not judging him, but like
Start
see
making him dark or something. Yeah.
right
He
to
was too
start
much of
just
a kid. Yeah.
it's
It's
it's that portrayal kind of stands on its own
yeah.
as like
Yeah. You kind of start you do establish like his attachments and the fear that he has of being alone, losing his mother. So I mean, it's good that it was established really early on. But he's still a kid, so we can't really see any darkness in him. But in Attack of the Clones, there's already signs there.
So let's do
So
that. Attack of the
okay.
Clones. We already kind of prefaced it saying that we
Mhm.
might not have been as kind to it as we
Mhm.
probably should have been. So now you take yourself back. Go back to
Mhm.
that younger version of yourself watching Attack of the Clones for the first time. And well, I think there's two discussions, because there's one, how we felt watching the movie the first time, and then like
Yeah.
how we felt revisiting it.
Right.
So how did you
Okay.
feel watching Attack of the Clones, and specifically Hayden's portrayal of Anakin when you first saw the movie?
Yeah. I was not a
Really? Like from the
fan
get-go?
from the get go.
Interesting.
The whole like age gap between Anakin and Padme like kind of grossed me out a little bit. I did not understand the need for that, and it's so kind of weird when like he first like sees Padme again, and he's kind of like this obsessed like stalker kind of version is
Mhm,
how
mhm.
they portray it, and she's just like still calling him Annie, and
Mhm,
like
mhm,
he's a
mhm.
little kid, and it kind of still gives me the creeps a little bit, honestly. Um, but yeah, and I thought the character, and obviously it wasn't Hayden's fault. I mean, I was super judgmental back then. I was like, he's a terrible actor. He just, he doesn't know what Anakin is supposed to be. Clearly, it wasn't his fault. The writing was just like, that's how the character was written. But I found him super annoying and whiny. And I was not a fan. And then, sorry, George Lucas, we just said that you do some things right, but other things you do not know how to do, like
That's very
writing
true.
conversations between people. You don't know how people talk,
That's
normal
true.
people at least. So and even back then, when I first saw it, there was the love story just was not believable to me. I couldn't see it. It was like he was like her stalker, and she just kind of well, he's a kid and it's fine, and I'll give him a
Mhm,
chance. So I didn't really believe this like tragic love story that you were kind of expecting was going to
mhm,
happen.
mhm.
Obviously, it ends in tragedy, but because I don't buy the love story kind of to begin with, it was kind of jarring to me. So yeah, wasn't a fan.
It's kind of a thankless task, honestly, to make a
I know.
prequel. And
Yep.
I commend George for the attempt, right? And now, I mean, now, like when I okay, let's backtrack a little bit. When I saw Attack of the Clones, I loved that. I love that movie. Like it was amazing. I thought it was like everything.
You were all in.
I was, and I remember like it was yesterday trying to go to that movie, because I remember I had bought, because like in the original trilogy days, I had like my plastic Darth Vader lightsaber. And
Right.
then when it was time, when to the lead up of Attack of the Clones, all the toys had been released. So I had bought, my parents bought me
Yeah, yeah.
the Anakin Skywalker blue lightsaber. And I remember I really wanted it because the hilt is like the opposite of the Darth Vader one. It's like the same hilt, but
Right.
without black. So I'm like, oh my god, I
I
have the
need it. I need
lightsaber, I have the Darth Vader,
it.
now I need the Anakin. So, and I remember the internet was starting up in those days, so we had that. So I had dial up, so I was able to kind of see pictures of and videos of like the premieres all over the world. And I remember seeing people bringing their lightsabers into the movie theater and like
Yeah.
being excited about it. I'm like, oh well, I have a lightsaber. Let's go. So I remember I went to the Caribbean Cinemas at San Patricio. Went with my parents to go see Attack of the Clones, and I bring my lightsaber. And then the usher there I was taking tickets. It's like, oh no, you can't bring the lightsaber because that's a weapon. Blah blah. And like everyone was like, it's a plastic toy. It's like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? So whatever. My family's very polite, so we didn't really fight too much. So I had to run to the car to leave the
To drop off the
lightsaber
lightsaber.
to come back. And this is all beside the point. It's just to say
Yeah.
that like I was very excited for the movie, and I loved it, especially with the whole Yoda fighting Count Dooku and all the Jedi in the Geonosis arena. Like those were things that like now I'm not a big fan of because I feel like
Yeah.
those weren't the probably the right way to portray some of those things. But
Yeah.
at the
Mhm.
time, I was just like, oh my god, this is the best thing. There were no faults in this trilogy
For you. Yeah.
at the time, as
Yeah.
far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
It's only after the fact that like, you start getting older and getting more cynical and talking
Yeah.
to you and
Well, I mean, by the
and
time
seeing the
Attack of the
vitriol.
Clones by the time Attack of the Clones came out, I was in college. So, I was too cool for school and I had to criticize
That's
everything.
true, and
I
we all go
had
through that. We all go through
and
that.
I had clearly lost the childhood wonder. I was on the hate train.
That's
Long
and that's fine. We
Yeah.
all go
It
through. We just have to
happens. Yeah.
we all have to be cognizant that that we have to be better at some
Yeah.
point. But yeah, but again, like I didn't see too many problems with the Anakin portrayal just because I was watching Star Wars to enjoy it.
Right. New Star Wars.
A new Star Wars, exactly. It's like
Yeah.
it's new Star
Uh-huh.
Wars, and then all the video games would come out. I had like Jedi Starfighter, and then Galactic Battlegrounds, and then the expansions with like all the clone campaigns. And I was living my best life. And when was this 2002? So
Yeah.
I was loving it. I think it's interesting how much changed between going coming out of Attack of the Clones and then going into Revenge of the Sith, because I think that's when the whole kind of switch was starting to happen of being a little more. Uh,
Yeah.
there's some things here that are maybe not the best, but still, but I was still on the hype train. I didn't see those faults. Although to kind of fast forward to my point of view, which kind of aligned with yours a little bit, I do think that the Anakin portrayal was just rushed in a
Yeah.
way because episode one didn't kind of give you the benefit of developing those relationships between one, him
Yeah.
and Obi-Wan, two,
Mhm.
him and Padme. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to cram all those things into one movie that is also doing a lot of heavy lifting for the trilogy to be able to establish the Clone
Mhm.
Wars.
The Clone Wars.
So
Yeah.
so the movie was, I mean, the movie was doing a lot with
Yeah.
very little
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
So in hindsight, it's a rushed movie because it was kind of didn't have the benefit of having the previous movie to develop a lot of these things.
Mhm.
So I don't know if the decision to have made Padme have that age gap
Yeah.
appropriate, because then again, like you don't have like that time for them to reconcile that
Mhm.
in some way. Maybe it would have been better. I mean, it shoulda, woulda, coulda type of thing. Maybe it could have
Yeah.
been better if like Anakin maybe was a little older and like that
Yeah.
relationship is explored a little bit more as a developing friendship in episode one, and then in two it gets more complex because now they're
Yeah.
both adults or something like that. But that's not the movie we got.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can only talk about the movie we have, and in love and war, anything goes, and maybe it was one of those things where like it's war, so we kind of
Yep. Yep.
speed through. We're about to get
Speed through
killed.
the courting.
We're about to get killed by these animals here in the arena. So I love you, man. I love you.
I love you.
And she's
You
like,
you
fine.
caught up CGI apples or pears for me. Yeah. in a creepy, creepy way.
The thing about that scene is that,
That scene is so creepy. I
well,
think
one, but two, it's kudos to Natalie Portman. Is her trying to get like the bite of the CGI pear, and then you just see it disappear inside her. It's God, like I don't know in what world George thought that was sexy.
oh god.
It's
It's
I don't
one of the
know. I don't
worst
know.
seduction scenes I've ever seen.
Look,
Honestly, it's just terrible.
the dating scene sucks to begin with, and you
Yeah.
always want to
Yeah.
be like you always want to put yourself apart from the herd and be like, ah, but I'm cooler than all those guys. And obviously, Anakin had the advantage of having the
Of having
Force.
Jedi powers.
But I'm not sure that that particular usage of the Force was the most erotic way to seduce Padme. I don't know. I
God.
don't have the Force. So I don't know what I. But that's
What you would actually do.
but
Probably
that's
not that.
but if I were to make a top 5 list, that would not crack the top 20. I don't know.
Idea.
But Padme did, one of the things that I've always found hilarious too, and I see this on the internet all the time, so there's no need to beat a dead horse about it. Is the scene when when Padme is telling Anakin no that they can't do this because he's a
Yeah.
senator and he's a Jedi, and what would people think? Blah blah blah. And then she wears the sexiest dress in the history of Star Wars. And it's just like, girl, like you're like
Yeah.
that's some like that's some
Mixed signals.
that's some
Mixed
mixed
signals.
signals things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, wear some I don't know, wear some pajama bottoms or something, but don't wear like the sexiest dress in the history of the
Mm,
galaxy to tell
yeah.
him you can't be with him because that's just gonna.
Yeah.
And it did, right? Short
Yeah.
circuit him to an
Yeah.
extent. I don't know. I wouldn't. Well, I don't have sexy dresses, I guess, but if I did, that's not the direction I would go in.
Okay.
But poor Anakin. But but things worked out to an extent. He lost his arm, but
Got a wife.
got a wife, I guess. Uh, Return of the Jedi. Revenge of the Sith is, I feel like I think most fans would think that is the better of the trilogy. What did you think of Anakin there? Do you feel that Hayden's performance was a little better from like how you
Yeah.
received it in Attack of the Clones, or do you think that it was just a symptom of the story kind of being a little more faster paced and more what we wanted from that movie to tie back to the original
Yeah.
trilogy? What were your thoughts there?
I did think it was better. The portrayal of the character. And maybe it is like you were saying, it's just because the story is different and we get to see, his transition into Darth Vader, which is kind of what all of us wanted to see. Like that was the end game.
Hmm hmm
I remember I did actually really like it when I first saw it. I was like in a good mood because I had just graduated from college. So I literally went from my graduation ceremony to the movie theaters to watch Revenge of the
hmm
Sith. So I did like it. Obviously, at the end, even that first watching, the whole Padme died for love and like
There's good in him though.
she's she's completely healthy. She's just lost the will to live kind of thing was just like super stupid to me even back then. And I also that whole death scene, she's like dying and naming the twins and it's just it was so over dramatic. And obviously that terrible no from Vader at the end.
hmm
But otherwise, I really, really enjoy it. It was kind of afterwards that I started to have issues with like the lava fight being too long and all the other issues that I started to have with the film. But in general, I I enjoyed Hayden's portrayal of Anakin way more in this film. And I was actually pretty satisfied with it. There were still, some lines that don't really fit into like the emotion for some of those scenes. Some of the conversations were still kind of wooden, but again, that's because George Lucas
George.
should not have written those scripts. But otherwise, I was a little bit more sucked into what was happening.
hmm
What did you think?
Hmm. I was about to say what I always say after you wrap up saying something, but this time I'm
That's
not going
interesting.
to. I didn't say it. You did.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like there were some of the similar issues that we had with Attack of the Clones with Revenge of the Sith, and it's that it's very rushed, and necessarily so because it's a movie that has to continue the beginning of the Clone Wars, but also wrap them
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
you have to you have to kind of get from A to C and skipping
Yeah.
through B sometimes. Uh,
Yeah.
so I do think that Hayden was great in the movie. I just think that he didn't, not him personally, like the character didn't
Yeah.
have enough time to flesh out his story beats with all the characters. Because, for
Yeah.
example, his relationship with Padme and Obi-Wan should be like number one, but
Yeah.
they're all separated for most of the
Yeah.
movie. And
Yeah.
Padme,
Which a
as
weird what was a
badass,
weird decision. Yeah.
yeah, and as
Yeah.
badass as Padme is in episode 1 and 2, she is for the most part sidelined during 3. And I
Yeah.
understand that she's pregnant, so pregnant
But
women
still.
can't get on airplanes, but she can still,
Yeah.
find a way. I'm sure that there's been enough badass women in history that have done a lot of badass
Yeah.
things while pregnant. So
Yeah.
we could have
Yeah.
figured that out instead of like making her this fawning character, right? Because I
Mhm.
felt that during Revenge of the Sith, she's always in her apartment crying or
Yeah.
pining over Anakin,
And yeah, and being like
which
all needy and kind
right,
of
which
just
felt very
weak and
off
yeah.
character for her,
Yeah.
which also didn't leave a lot of time for him, for her and Anakin to have a lot of development for their relationship,
Right.
in my opinion. And the same could be said with Obi-Wan. They're separated right at the beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
just like they were in Attack of the Clones. So I don't feel that we ever got to feel Obi-Wan and Anakin be the father and son or the brothers in arms that we're always
Yeah.
told that they are. So,
Mhm.
and I know that's the nature of the movie, that the movie needs to, get going because there's
Yeah.
lots of things that need to happen to get to make Anakin Darth Vader. I get that. But in terms of like the human core of the
Yeah.
performance and like how those relationships happen between those characters, it just didn't happen because it
It's
didn't have
lacking.
time.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
maybe, and this is gonna be controversial because I know a lot of younger millennials and Gen Zers love the Revenge of the Sith lava fight, but I think that
I don't
I
it's
think
too
that
long.
fight,
It's too
it's
CGI'd. Yeah.
it sucks. I'm sorry. I think it's a bottom tier. It's only above Attack of the Clones in terms of like the lightsaber fights in the
Yeah.
whole saga, because it's just it feels too choreographed instead of like raw,
Yeah.
like a
Mhm.
Duel of the Fates does, for example. And I think maybe we have cut half of that fight and just given it to moments between
Yeah.
Anakin and Padme,
And
Anakin and
Obi-Wan and
Obi-Wan.
yeah.
That would have
Mhm.
definitely benefited a lot to highlight the tragedy of
Of what
Anakin's
was
fall.
happening. Yeah. Mhm.
So that's it. I feel like on the whole, I feel like the prequels, considering that Anakin is supposed to be the main character of the prequels, and he wasn't
Yeah.
during one of those movies, kind of did a disservice to that development of him as a character. Not Hayden's performance. I think Hayden's performance was the best that he could do
With the script.
with the material that he got,
Yep.
and I think that that is definitely going to be highlighted when we talk about his portrayals in Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. But after the prequels, we were able to get some Star Wars content that was able to maybe bridge a lot of those gaps that we've been
Yep.
talking about from some dissatisfaction we might have had in terms of like those interpersonal relationships, and that is the great and mighty the Clone Wars.
Clone Wars.
Nanny, you took a while to get into the Clone Wars.
I took a long time. I remember when it first came out, I wasn't a fan of the animation and I was like, I don't need this for anything. It's just going to be I didn't know what I thought it was supposed to be, but I just thought it was
Why?
not something that I needed. I don't know. I don't know why. I was just like, I don't like the animation
Yeah.
style. Like,
But you love the
and
Bad Batch.
I love the Bad Batch, but I got
Is
into
that-
the Bad Batch after I got into Clone Wars.
I know that's the same
And I
animation
started,
style.
no, and the animation style, it definitely improved every season.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
it's still not my go-to animation, but I ended up falling in love with the show. And obviously, the only reason I watched it was for the podcast because I was basically forced.
Ha,
And it's
no pun
it's
intended.
weird. Yeah, I know. And it was weird that it took me so long because Hosbando was actually a huge fan. And he would constantly try to get me to watch. It's like, you need to watch this. I know you are kind of upset with the prequels because you didn't get enough of the Clone Wars. You didn't get to see Anakin as a general. You didn't get to see all these things. That's what this show is. Watch it. And I think it took me a while to really get into it too, because at first it's kind of like the episodes are very disjointed and
Yeah.
you don't get a lot of like consistent story beats. And you'd be like, oh, you get into one storyline and then, oh, it's done. We're moving on to something
So
else.
you mean
And
that the whole arc aspect
yeah,
of it wasn't
especially
working
because
for
at
you?
first, because eventually they get better because it's like 3 episode arcs and you see like more continuity. But at first, I felt like it was more disjointed. So it
Mhm.
took me a little bit to really get into it. And for some reason, I really hated the Padme episodes. But I stuck with it, ended up completely falling in love with it. By the time we get to the last season, season 7, right? I was
Mhm,
like
mhm.
totally invested. I feel like it added so much to the story, to who Anakin was, to his relationships with his closest people, Padme, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka. Ahsoka was such a smart play to give
Mhm.
him a Padawan and just kind of have to flesh out who he is as a Jedi and who he is as a Jedi at war. And I really did fall in love with it. And I'm sorry it took me so long, but now that
The
to
important thing is you
me
made it.
I know. And to me, that series, so for people that have not wanted to watch it for whatever reason, it really elevates the prequels and it adds so much more to the story of Anakin and just the Jedi in general during the Clone Wars. And, not only that, but the relationships that he had with the 501st. So we get so much meat into like the relationships with the clones, with their people, like how he leads. And now I kind of want to watch it again.
You should.
I'm
It's
rethinking
available
it.
currently on
Yeah.
Disney Plus.
Yes. Mhm.
How did you feel though, now specifically with I was gonna say Hayden's portrayal, with Anakin's portrayal by Matt Latner now?
I thought that was really on point. I mean,
Mhm.
that was the Anakin that I wanted all along. That great leader that because it isn't tragic if it's somebody that nobody likes or somebody that didn't do anything. I mean,
Right.
you have to see how great of a leader he was, how loved he was by his men, how loved he was by his wife, by his friend Obi-Wan, by his Padawan, for his story to be as tragic as it is. Because you see this great man, this great leader fall so horribly. And I
Mhm.
think it was established in the Clone Wars just what an extraordinary leader he really was and why everybody thought that Anakin Skywalker was a hero and
Mhm, mhm.
how horrible it was for the people that knew that Anakin became Darth Vader.
For me, one of the things that threw me off at first, and obviously this is a nitpick, so like
Yeah.
I'm bringing it up to see what you think of this. Was the voice, because everyone
Okay.
else for the most part, especially
The
like
voices.
James
Yeah.
Arnold Taylor's doing like a spot on Obi-Wan.
Mhm.
Catherine Tabor, I think is the actor that did Padme. Kind of sounds like Padme. But for me, like Matt Latner wasn't
Yeah.
sounding like
Like,
Anakin.
yeah.
Did you get that when you started watching it? Like he first starts talking, did you feel a disconnect between how he sounded in the show versus how he sounded in the in the movie?
Well, because I didn't really like how he sounded in the movies because it was like this kind of
Gotcha.
whiny, kind of younger version. So to hear him be like a little bit more masculine, I guess is the correct word. Um
Sure.
I yeah, I don't know because he has like a deeper voice and
Yeah.
um so I don't think it was so much of a disconnect for me and
Mhm.
uh I was it kind of seemed like a different Anakin. Like we're
Mhm,
getting
mhm, mhm.
a whole new Anakin. So just because of that, I don't think and because I wasn't a fan of like the previous version that we gotten, I was like, "Oh, I'm okay with this Anakin. This is fine."
I don't know if that was then a conscious decision by
Mhm.
Dave Filoni or whoever it was that
Mhm.
was, involved with
To like make him
the
sound
voice
older, more
acting,
mature or something.
or to just distance him from the
Yeah.
portrayal of
Because
Anakin
there
in the
had been a lot
movie.
of backlash. Yeah, there was a lot of hate for Hayden back then. I know.
It was a lot of hate for a lot of people back then,
Yeah.
which we need to,
Yeah.
atone for as fans. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure if that was kind of a conscious decision to say like, okay,
Distance a little bit from.
let's
Yeah.
do kind of a different thing and a different
Mhm.
sound for this character to, just do kind of our own version of it.
Mhm.
Hopefully not. Hopefully it was just like, well, this is the right person for the character, and he just happens to sound a little different.
Older, more mature. Yeah.
But I mean, I wouldn't say that sounds older, more mature, because I do think
Mhm.
that there's a lot of immaturity to
To
Anakin
Anakin. Yeah.
during, especially like during obviously the first half of the show, uh, which is like
Recklessness
that
and
reckless
yeah.
playfulness to
Mhm.
him. But I think where the show had really excels was kind of having a lot of moments between him, Obi-Wan, and Padme. And
Yeah.
like through those, and obviously and obviously Ahsoka is
Yeah.
another vehicle for Anakin to also
Mhm.
express himself, and for us to see where he's at and what he feels about things, because he can't confide with Padme and Obi-Wan about some things the way that he can with
With
Ahsoka.
Ahsoka. Yeah.
So it's great to see like this trinity of characters that like Anakin can relate to in different
In
facets of
different
his
ways.
life,
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
those different ways that really complement the Anakin of the films, and then especially the Anakin of Revenge of the Sith really
Yeah.
recontextualizes it for us, especially after we see Ahsoka leave the Jedi Order, and
Yeah.
we
And how
see
that
Anakin's
breaks him. Yeah. Mhm.
disenfranchisement with that. It it's wild. It's wild, like how some other story can completely give a lot more depth and
Yeah.
nuance to a
Mhm.
previous one that we saw before. Now, I'm not saying that all stories should count on that to be able to give the
Right.
gravitas to the individual story that it needs, because now it's just like, oh well, we won't develop that because then we'll just have a show or a book that's
Something
going to
else that
develop it
explains it. Yeah. Mhm.
so that it fixes it. It's like, no, that's lazy. I think that it should stand on its own, and if something else comes in that enhances it, all the better for it. But yeah, but I think definitely the Clone Wars did a lot for us
Yeah.
as fans to be able to at
Mhm.
least understand a little bit better what
Right.
uh,
Yeah. Because
the
I feel
Anakin
like
of the
in
prequels was about.
yeah, and especially in Revenge, for me, it felt like it was too easy for Anakin to be turned. I felt like it was too easy. And then with the
Hmm.
Clone Wars, we get that he was having issues with the Jedi. There's a lot of stuff that he stopped believing in, and especially after Ahsoka left him, he was in a very vulnerable place. So
Hmm.
I feel like all of that fed into obviously all the things that Palpatine was telling him, and it makes
Hmm.
way more sense for him to have turned after knowing everything that you know from the Clone Wars. So that was one thing that I was always, before I watched Clone Wars, that I would think, why did he turn so easily? I mean, I know he was
Hmm.
afraid that he was going to lose Padme and all this stuff, but it was a pretty quick decision. But now that you know from Clone Wars, from all the experiences that he had to go through, that it wasn't necessarily an easy decision
Or quick.
or quick. And it felt, I think, to him when he made that decision that it was the only
The
decision
only
going
one.
forward.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So
Good job. Good job. Good job, Filoni. That was good. That was good with
that was good.
the Clone Wars. After that, we don't really have. I mean, obviously, a lot more stories in publishing that we can talk
Hmm.
about, but we would be here for hours on end. And obviously, the both of us have not read all of the stories, so we're mainly focusing on TV and film. So after that, we haven't really seen Anakin again until the sequel trilogy, and the only way we actually get to see him is as a Force voice, I guess,
Yeah.
and Rise of Skywalker, when he tells Rey that she can do it, when she's talking to the
Hmm.
spirits of Jedi past and all that stuff. But it's interesting the approach that the sequel trilogy took in terms of how it handled the prequel trilogy, which is let's not,
That's yeah.
which I think is a disservice to
Yeah.
Star Wars as a whole, because if you're gonna have like this new trilogy that's gonna tie and
Yeah.
bookend six whole films, to then ignore half of those films,
Right.
or a third, I guess, if you're looking at all three
Hmm.
trilogies, it's unfair, especially for a lot of like millennial fans and Gen Z fans that like
Yeah.
come up with a lot of them
grew
with
up
the
with
with
the
the
prequels.
prequel
Yeah.
trilogy
Hmm.
as their main
Yeah.
trilogy, to now have and not even acknowledge it at all is it's a baffling choice, especially
Yeah.
without giving Darth Vader the nuance that he deserved, because the story of Darth Vader isn't about Darth Vader, it's about his redemption. And then
Right.
to see Kylo
Obsessing over the
be
helmet
be
and
a
just
fanboy
yeah.
over Darth Vader,
Yeah.
I think it's good. I think it's cool
Hmm.
storytelling. But
Hmm.
and if you listen to our episodes from a couple years ago when we were, discussing the sequel trilogy, one of the missed opportunities was just like how we recontextualize uh, Darth Vader for Kylo Ren or Ben Solo,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
that never happens. We never really get like a moment where we stop to say like Darth Vader isn't the person is Anakin, and Darth
Yeah.
Vader was a persona that
Hmm.
Anakin adopted after his
Yeah.
fall to the dark side, and he renounced once he came back. So,
Right.
and how that mirrors and ties into Ben's journey, it's
Yeah.
left on the cutting room floor for some reason. So it's very unfulfilling to see a story of the chosen one through 6 films, and then like the sequel trilogy not get the acknowledgement that the
Yeah. That.
chosen one
Hmm.
deserves. How did you
Yeah.
feel about that? Did you come into the sequel trilogy expecting some Anakin Skywalker, or were you just like, let's not even talk about it?
Well, I remember we had a lot of conversations building up to the sequel trilogy.
Oh
Like
yes, we did. It was a beautiful
we were
time.
so excited. Again, we didn't think we were gonna get them when it was announced that everybody was coming back for it. Uh,
It's
Again,
a
it's so
magical
sad
time.
that it was
2015
a
was a great year.
magical time having all those like conversations about what we expected. And I wasn't I think we talked about like maybe some of the Force Ghosts coming back, and I think that
Mhm,
would have been a way for Anakin to be brought back. Which I mean, I think it was a missed opportunity because I mean, you do get Obi-Wan Kenobi as a Force Ghost in the original ones, and then you could use Anakin. Like Anakin did redeem himself. You would think that maybe
mhm,
he'd have some conversations with Luke, maybe with Leia, who we never got to meet while he was alive. There
mhm,
were things there. Like he became a part of the Force, so he's an asset there that you could use. And we got Yoda as a Force Ghost coming
mhm.
back in the film, so why not Anakin? So I did think we were gonna get something. I was really disappointed at him, like Kylo Ren talking to the melted helmet, because to me that's when Luke takes his body to burn at the pyre is one of the things that always stand out to me a lot about the original films. And to just see that degraded into like it's a melted helmet that Kylo uses as an idol, as an
Mhm,
excuse to act like the villain, when like you said, the story about Anakin wasn't about being the villain. It's about the fact that even after all the heinous things that he did, he was able to redeem himself.
right.
And it's you would think they would raise him knowing the whole story, not just let him think that like did he not know the whole story? Did they never tell him, or did he just decide to ignore the story and
He does know the whole
believe
story, he does,
so
but he thinks that, like, Anakin Skywalker was the failed version and that Darth
yeah,
Vader was the true, you
was the
know
true version. Yeah. So
so
I don't
so
know.
he had a distorted view
Hmm.
of it because of,
Hmm.
we have that's one of those books that I haven't read Bloodline. I haven't read a couple of those ones that touch specifically on it, but I do
Into
know
that,
that
yeah.
he
He
is
did know
aware.
the story. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But no, I agree, and especially with Rise of Skywalker, which pet peeve of mine, it should have been called Rise of Skywalker, not The Rise of Skywalker. It's a pet peeve. It's a pet peeve. Is the Return of the Jedi called The Return of the
The
Jedi?
yeah.
Is Revenge of the Sith called The Revenge of the Sith? Like, no,
Yeah.
it's like there's a nice symmetry to
Yeah. Leave it alone.
all
Yeah.
three final films to be uh something of the something, and then it's
Hmm.
just they all start with R, and that's it. And I don't know why I don't know why it annoys me so much. I
But it
don't know
does.
why. The original trilogy only has one film title that starts with the, and that's The Empire Strikes Back. The prequel trilogy only has one, and that's The Phantom Menace.
Menace.
And the sequel trilogy, all three start with the, and I don't know why it drives me up the wall. Rise of
It
Skywalker.
does.
That's it. Rise
Yeah.
of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Why do you need
Hmm.
to call the Rise of
Yeah.
Skywalker? Done. Anyway, Small rant done,
Yeah.
concluded. We can move on with our lives. I mean, you can. I
Yes.
won't move on with my life, but
Yeah.
I'll stop talking about it.
Okay.
It's that scene when, and I know it's a poignant scene. I know why it is the person that it is. But when Kylo talks to the memory of Han Solo, I'm just like, I mean, I get it. It's his father. He did
Yeah.
patricide, and it makes sense that the person that can, fill that gap, since Leia
Mhm.
can't do it, since Carrie Fisher passed, it
Yeah.
makes sense that it's Harrison Ford. But to also an extent, don't we
It could have been
want
Anakin. Yeah.
Anakin? And it's one of those things where like, is that the right moment for Anakin? Probably not, because he never
Yeah.
had a relationship with him. Think it might maybe makes more sense, like you said, to have had Anakin with Luke, since it's
Yeah.
like father and son, all that stuff, and then it's Luke's ghost that haunts
Mhm.
Kylo, like in some of the leaked
Mhm.
scripts that happen. But it's so odd to have this giant presence of the chosen one be both acknowledged and ignored, because it's yeah, you have the voice
Yeah.
in Rise of Skywalker there at the end, but then you don't say his name during the whole of the movies, and you only bring in Darth Vader because Darth Vader sells. It's I don't know.
Yeah.
As
It
much
was
as I
like a
love most of the
yeah.
sequel trilogy, I feel like there was a lot of missed opportunity there to be
Mhm.
connective of like all
Right.
9 films,
Mhm.
and instead it just feels like, okay, let's just tie into the original trilogy.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
But that would not be the end of the story for
For
any
Anakin.
Anakin or Hayden Christensen. And when we got the announcement for Obi-Wan Kenobi, we also got the announcement that Hayden would be coming back as
Coming
Darth
back.
Vader. As
Yeah.
Darth Vader. They only announced it as Darth Vader. They didn't announce Anakin Skywalker would be
Yeah.
coming back. And I remember we were speculating back then. We had
Flipping out.
we
Yeah.
had we had an episode called The Chosen Ones Reprise where we were talking about that return, and if
Yeah.
like you're not gonna bring back Hayden Christensen and not show his face
Just for the helmet.
just for the
Yeah.
helmet, because they already had
Mhm.
an actor portray Darth Vader in Rogue One, blah 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 blah. Lo
Mhm.
and behold, we were right. So looking back now, in the lead up to Ahsoka having Obi-Wan Kenobi, we a cold open of sorts to Hayden's return to both of
Yeah.
the characters, Darth Vader and Obi
Yeah.
and
And
Anakin
Anakin.
Skywalker. How did you feel about it, especially as someone who didn't respond all that well to
So
his
the original,
portrayal
yeah.
in the
Yeah.
prequels? Were you still excited that he was still gonna do it, even though
I
you
was
weren't
actually
thrilled?
really excited because once I got over my unfair hate and acknowledging the fact that it really wasn't his fault as an actor, like
Hmm.
the decisions that were made with the character because he has no control over the script or anything, it's really nostalgic to have him back. I mean, even if I wasn't a huge fan sometimes, it's still Star Wars. I always love Star Wars, and to have Hayden Christensen back and to have, the fandom kind of re-embrace him for, all the unfair hate that he got for a
Yep.
lot of years. It was really exciting. And then the way they did it, because they brought back Darth Vader and brought back horror Vader done in
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
really, really intense way, and
Hmm.
to see the continuation of his relationship with Obi-Wan once he became Darth Vader, because
Right.
we'd only seen that one fight in episode 4 and it was kind of, short, and as much as I love the original ones, that fight is very, very point, point, point.
You
And then
know,
yeah,
whatever. We're not gonna talk about that.
I know. But to see it, now, like the
Hmm.
aggressiveness, the kind of the hate, like
Hmm.
you are the reason I'm in this suit, that I don't have most of my limbs, that, and now I will drag you through the fire kind of thing. It was,
What are you? I am what you made me. It's like, oh my god, that's a great line. Yep.
it's so good. It was so good. And then to have the flashbacks that we were so hoping for, to actually see him as Anakin Skywalker, training with Obi-Wan, trying to see, how they were before everything went to shit. And then
Hmm. Hmm.
continuing through, you know, Vader's hunt of Obi-Wan, because it's like his last tie to him being Anakin is
Hmm.
Obi-Wan in his mind, because his kids, he doesn't know they exist, and Luke is like, he kind of put it off his mind, but his last connection, and then obviously they didn't know him as Anakin anyway, but his last connection to who Anakin was is Obi-Wan, and his need to like destroy him so he can completely ignore that Anakin ever existed.
Hmm.
And everything they did with the half helmet off, where you got to see half his face, like reminiscent of what they did in Rebels when he
Hmm.
meets with
Yeah,
Ahsoka,
so good.
and it was it was so good. And I thought Hayden Christensen's acting was spot on. I believed him as Anakin, as the Anakin I fell in love with in Clone Wars. He was able to transition that and become that Anakin,
Hmm.
even more so in Ahsoka, and we'll get to that. But yeah, he was able to. He is the Anakin from the Clone Wars, and
Do
we
you
got to see him
do you
again.
feel though that Obi-Wan the show would have benefited from being a movie over a show?
Maybe, maybe, because there were some things that weren't necessary, I guess, to get the story to come full circle. But the thing is that I did actually like the show.
Yeah,
So,
I thought the show was great. Yeah.
so I think things that we didn't necessarily think that were necessary, we would have been lacking. It was just a film, because there was so much going on with his relationship with Anakin, but his relationship with Leia, I thought was fantastic. And I think if we would have limited to a movie, it would have felt really rushed, and we wouldn't have gotten as much fleshing out of those relationships as we did get. So
I agree.
yeah.
And yeah, I agree with everything you say. So like I don't feel like I need
We
to
need to
add
add.
I don't need to add that much. The only thing maybe is that I wish, and again I think this is counter to the argument of like maybe a movie would have been better because it could have been more lean in terms of the story,
Uh-huh.
but making it more lean also means that we don't get to have more of a thing.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe the show, and maybe this is me being selfish, who knows, uh might have benefited from having either a longer flashback, actually not a longer flashback scene. I think the show would have benefited of more
More
flashbacks.
flashbacks.
Like there's like these snippets that are happening
Snippets of, yeah. Mhm.
every time, not every time, but every once in a while when something kind of happens and it triggers
Yeah.
like a memory from Obi-Wan.
Right.
Uh
And to like
the,
parallel to what's happening in the present, and then
ex-
have the, yeah.
exactly. I
Yeah.
mean the same
Mhm.
way that the flashback operated in the show, I feel like maybe a couple more of those would have really
Of
helped
those, yeah.
to
Mhm.
flesh that out a bit more. And maybe it actually doesn't need the fleshing out. If you want the fleshing out, go watch the prequels or the Clone Wars show.
Yeah.
But I was just selfish.
Just to see the two of them
I
together.
want the
Yeah.
two of them together, and especially because I wanted Clone Wars armor. So I really was,
But we got that in
I was
Ahsoka.
getting very
Obviously, we didn't get
greedy.
Obi-Wan,
We
but
didn't get Obi-Wan, but we got
yeah,
Anakin. Oh my god,
you
that
got
was
Anakin.
one of the best days of my life. But yeah, I was very greedy. I was very greedy during Obi-Wan. I'm like, oh, I need this.
I need
And
his. Yeah.
even though I got some of it, I was just like, that's not. I want more. But we did get a lot more. And now, like in the final part of this conversation, up until maybe a further episode when Anakin comes back again, who knows?
Yeah.
But now with Ahsoka, that concluded a couple weeks ago. We have obviously not only more Anakin, but a lot more Anakin in a lot of
Yeah.
different versions of himself, which I thought was incredible. So
Yeah.
obviously Hayden, back when he was cast for Obi-Wan, it was rumored that he was also cast in Ahsoka at the
Yeah.
same time, and that he would be working on those shows in tandem. Obviously, he was denying it, saying like, "Oh, it would be great to
Yeah.
work on it, but I'm not
Yeah.
part of it." Uh, Obviously, that was a lie, and we thankfully were right, and we got Hayden in Ahsoka in a way that I think actually transcends his appearance in Obi-Wan Kenobi, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because
It does.
just the one, I mean, he's in a couple episodes, but the one episode, I think it was episode 5, when they're in the world between worlds, it's
Oh
just
God.
something
Mind blowing.
that, as Star Wars fans, that was I think it was the culmination of all these decades of storytelling from the prequels to Clone Wars, and now like this Disney Plus era of Star Wars storytelling to kind of crescendo into in this moment, right?
Yeah.
It was something that I never knew was going to happen. Always wanted, I guess, even though I didn't know that I wanted it,
Yeah.
but it was incredible, and it's exceeded all of my expectations. What about yours? Did you have expectations of like how Hayden was gonna show up? And if so, did were they met, were they exceeded, or did they fall short?
I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't think we were going to get as much of him as we got, honestly. I was really surprised by that. Uh, I was hoping we were going to get a world between worlds kind of thing happening, especially because there were hints about it from the beginning that this is where we were headed. But that episode, I was never expecting anything like that. I think that's actually my favorite episode of the show.
Hmm.
It exceeded all expectations I could have had. I think Hayden was on point.
Hmm.
And then to see him with, the Clone Wars armor, to see him with the 501st, to see him first like with young Ahsoka and like that development, because it's one thing to have been redeemed by saving your son. It's another thing to kind of like try to fix that relationship with Ahsoka, because as we saw in Rebels, he was able to see her again as Darth Vader, and there was always a lot of guilt in Ahsoka that she felt that she was going to end up like Anakin.
Hmm.
So Anakin coming back to her after being redeemed, it just kind of brings the whole story for full circle.
Hmm.
And to see, because I don't think he really knew how to finish her training, and then he was able to do it now after everything that happened, and after being redeemed by saving his son and finding his humanity again. And it was just, I thought it was a beautiful end. I mean, we have him now back. Like it isn't necessarily the end of Anakin, but to see him kind of like fulfill his role as master and be able to give Ahsoka the confidence to be a master herself, because she was struggling with it so much because she never finished her training really.
Right.
And to be able to see that with Hayden Christensen, and we get to see him at the end with the robes and everything, like completely becoming who he was. It's just, it was beautiful.
It was beautiful. It was
It
beautiful.
was
I
beautiful.
I I I never
Never in my life.
never in my life did I
Yep.
think that that sequence in the world between worlds was going to happen.
Oh,
And it was so good because it's one of those things where you don't know what you're going to get and you don't know what
yeah.
you want either. So
And then you get
yes,
so much more.
we want Hayden back, but we also want
Yeah.
the Anakin from the Clone Wars. But
Yeah.
Hayden's never met Ahsoka or Rosario
Yeah.
Dawson's Ahsoka, so
Yeah.
like we don't know like how his portrayal is
How it's gonna work.
because
Yeah.
it was a tough cookie, right, for
Yeah.
Hayden to do because he needed to kind of merge like his own
Yeah.
portrayal of
Mhm.
Anakin with Matt Latner's portrayal, like in during
Right.
the Clone Wars, but also kind of do like his like, oh,
Own thing. Yeah.
I've been
Mhm.
Vader, and now I'm in the I'm in a different moment in my life because I'm one with the Force now. So he's not
Yeah.
just playing Anakin Skywalker; he's playing
Yeah.
Anakin Skywalker in
And we do get that
completely different
glimpse
moments.
of Vader, Anakin. Like when
Yeah,
his eyes go yellow again and everything. Oh, it's so good.
and Hayden just like magnificently and masterfully
Transition
transitions
between.
from like
Mhm.
all of those different ones.
Yep.
Like he's the one with the Force. Anakin is very confident and at peace. He goes back to his joyful Matt Latner Clone Wars jokey
Reckless
self.
fighting. Yeah.
Goes to the dark Anakin from Revenge of the Sith. So the fact that Hayden Christensen is able to pull all of that off in just one episode is kind of a testament to the talent that he is.
Masterful.
It's a he is. I know he never got the rank of master from Mace
Yeah.
Windu, but we the Triad bestow the rank of master to Anakin Skywalker. So now we need to get in touch with Hayden Christensen's agent so we can get him on the show so we can
So we can knight him.
bestow it so we can knight him by the will of the Force, by the will of the Council. Do all that stuff. But yeah, no, it's beautiful, and to kind of end the show that way with this like his force ghost just looking
Yeah.
like proud and like at
Yeah.
Ahsoka that how far she's come and as she goes into the next part of her journey, it's
Yeah.
something beautiful, and again, it makes things taste a little better because Revenge
Yeah.
of the Sith left us with a bad taste in our mouth with how the fandom
Yeah.
treated Hayden in such a terrible way, and to like now be 10 years, almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
Oh my God, next year is going to be, wait, what year is it? We're in 2023.
2023.
In 2 years, it's going to be the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith, which is kind of wild to think about.
Wow.
2005, 2025. This is insane how time
Yep.
flies. But to see how in less than like in 18 years time, we went from like this toxic fandom, which is still toxic,
Yeah.
let's be honest, but toxic
Mhm.
against hate to all of a sudden like be so happy and
I know.
congratulatory and welcoming and satisfied, right? And it's wild because the last time we see Hayden's Anakin is in Revenge of the Sith when the mask comes down, and the last time we
Yep.
see him now is as the Force Ghost with his, full like we get to see him. Last time we
Yeah.
saw him, it's like we're hiding him, and now
Yeah.
he's just like himself again. And I think it's pretty damn poetic to see how like everything, like you said, has come full circle. And I don't know a better way to see the story because some stories don't get kind of a second chance to kind of come
Yeah.
around and like make people happy in this way, and the fact
Yeah.
that we're here is kind of a testament to the joy that Star Wars fans can have if
Yeah.
they kind of get over
If we
themselves.
embrace it.
Yeah,
Because that was so good. It's
it
so good.
was. And again, I think it's worth noting that it's not a matter of redemption. uh Hayden Christensen never needed redemption. The ones
Yeah.
that needed redemptions were the
We're
fans,
us. We needed to get over our crap.
us us that like were not kind and were not you know good
Fair.
good and
Either. We
fair.
were not fair.
So thankfully like a large contingency has been able to get over themselves and like see that we're just people trying to love the same franchise that we know that we've been
Yeah.
trying to love for all this time. And Hayden Christensen is one of those people. He loved Star Wars when he got cast, and he still loves it. And I'm so happy to have been able to be at Celebration the couple of
Yeah.
times that I have been to it and see how fans are so loving to him now, and get him to see that love and get him to feel it
Yeah.
because he wasn't feeling it for a while.
I
So to be able to finally be back and be like, no, this is like this is a
yeah.
180. It's a beautiful moment for sure.
I think with that we're done.
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah.
Until Ahsoka season 2, that we maybe, and this is us getting greedy again, until we get a little bit
Maybe we
more
get a little bit more.
of Hayden Christensen. So we'll see.
We'll see. So, any last thoughts?
Only that I'm excited for future Triad episodes. I think Ahsoka really kind of got our creative juices flowing in terms of
Yeah.
topics that we'd like to discuss in the future. So hopefully now that like we're finally getting back to some stability. I know last week we didn't
Yeah.
release something,
Start
but
churning out some
but
more
but
episodes.
we're getting back on that saddle. Don't worry about it. And it'll be fun. It'll be fun. A couple of episodes that we have planned. So I'm excited for that.
I am excited too. We, had a little glitch, but
Yeah, this second half of 2023
it's been hard. I mean, the strikes
has
were a
been
huge
tough.
deal too, and it's been a year, but
Yeah, I mean,
hey,
I feel the first half of the year was great. It's like
yep,
a epic year, but the second half
yeah.
has been a struggle bus. Not gonna lie,
But we're still here. We're
but
still
we're still
here,
here, and that's
and
what matters.
and we
Yep.
are the Triad of the Force. So remember to like, subscribe, ring that bell, leave us some comments. We want to know what you think about Anakin Skywalker, what he's meant to you as a character throughout all these years, and just let us know what you're thinking. Love Star Wars. We love you, and until next time, may the Force be with you.